نبي بعد نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. Now, inshallah, we'll continue with reading from the book entitled Al-Awsat في السنن والإجماع والاختلاف للإمام Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Ibrahim ibn al-Mundhir rahimahullah ta'ala, who passed away in the year 318 after the Hijrah. Now, so we are in the chapter where the author, he says, ذكر اختلاف أهل العلم في القيح والصديد وماء القرح. This chapter is regarding the disagreement of the people of knowledge regarding al-qayh والصديد وماء القرح. القيح والصديد وماء القرح. These are all three words that in English, there's one translation of them. The English translation of all three of these words is pus, i.e. that liquid that excretes out of wounds and open injuries. In Arabic, there is subtle differences between them, just like we know in English that pus can be of different colors and different viscosity, different thicknesses, different textures. Then likewise, in Arabic, each of these words are representative of a different type of fluid that comes out of the wound. So al-qayh, then as Ibn Manzur, he says in Lisan al-Arab, al-qayh al-middah al-khalisa, la yukhalituhu ad-dam. It's that pure substance that comes out of the wound. It's not mixed with any blood, meaning that thick, viscous substance that has a heavy texture to it. Some of them say it can be white in color, and it comes out of the wound. Like if you've ever had a scab and you see that white buildup around the scab, then that is al-qayh. He says, وَقِيلَ هُوَ الصَّدِيد. And some people say al-qayh is as-sadid, the same thing. While others say, as-sadid huwa al-ma'u raqiq. It is that more thin, fine fluid that comes out of the pus. Like if you have a scab and you might press down on it and you see that thin, fine fluid, it's not thick, that might leak out of the injury, then that is sadid. So you have al-qayh, which is the thicker fluid, and you have a sadid, which is that finer, thinner fluid. And then you have what they know as al-ma'ul qarh, the water of the injury, which is sometimes you might see the clear water. So like, for example, if sadid, it might be the yellowish liquid or the brownish liquid, while al-qayh might be that white, thick liquid, or sometimes it might be, closer to green, have a snot type of texture with it. And so that's the difference between qayh and sadid. As far as ma al-qarh, or the water of the injury, then that is that clear substance that you might see exiting the wound. And it's like a clear liquid, like as it's healing. Sometimes it might give off a clear liquid. If you ever injured your foot or something like that around your toenail, you might see it coming out in that area. And so, as we said, in English, all of these words are similar. But in Arabic, these words all have subtle differences. All of these words have subtle differences. Now, so the author is going to mention the disagreement of the scholars regarding this topic, i.e., do these substances nullify one's purification? And once again, we're in the book Al-Awsat li Ibn al-Mundhir. And so, as he always does, right now he's in the section of the book that is dealing with the things that the scholars disagree about, does it nullify one's purification? And so the individual, we know that there's disagreement about blood. The Sheikh Ibn al-Mundhir, the Imam Ibn al-Mundhir, he talked about dam al-istihada, the non-period bleeding. And he talked about those chronic conditions like the one who has chronic urination, continuous urination. And then he talked about the blood of hijama. If an individual gets a hijama, does that nullify wudu? Now we are going into something where, okay, things that aren't blood but come out from the places where blood comes out of. If the scholars disagreed about hijama and about the blood that flows out of a wound, then what about if it comes out of that wound something that isn't blood, which is al-qayh was-sadid wa ma'ul qarh, the different types of pus and liquids that excrete out of an injury. So the Sheikh rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, اختلف أهل العلم في القيح والصديد فقالت طائفة هما بمنزلة الدم وروينا هذا القول عن النخعي وبه قال مجاهد وعطاء وعروة بن الزبير والزهري وقتادة والشعبي والحكم. He says that the scholars, they disagree regarding pus. So a group of them say, and so this is the first opinion, a group of them say it is the same as blood. It has the same condition, or it's in the same position as blood. Whatever ruling you gave to blood, then pus has the same ruling. He says, and we've narrated this view from the statement of An-Nakhai, Ibrahim An-Nakhai. And it was also what was said by Mujahid ibn Jabr, as well as Ata ibn Abi Rabah, as well as Urwa ibn Zubayr, as well as Az-Zuhri and Qatada and Ash-Sha'bi and Al-Hakam. So we see that this view is a view that is from the people of Medina, as well as the people of Mecca, as well as the people of Kufa. This view was adopted across the board by various scholars, that pus in all of its different forms has the same ruling as blood. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, وَقَالَ اللَّيْثُ بْنُ سَعْدٍ الْقَيْحِ بِمَنْزِلَةِ الدَّمِ وَقَالَ الْحَكَمُ وَحَمَّادٍ كُلُّ شَيْءٍ يَخْرُجُ مِنَ الْإِنسَانِ فَهُوَ بِمَنْزِلَةِ الدَّمِ. He says, Layth ibn Sa'd was the Imam of Egypt. He said, Layth ibn Sa'd, he said that pus, specifically here using the word qayh, he says that al-qayh is in the same position as blood, i.e. it has the same ruling as blood. He says, and likewise al-Hakam and Hammad, and here Allah knows best, this Hammad is Hammad ibn Abi Sulaiman, the teacher of Abi Hanifa. He says that al-Hakam and Hammad, they said everything that comes out of the body of a person, then it is similar or in the same position of blood. And obviously this statement here, they say it general, but it needs to have some fine tuning with it, i.e. everything that comes out of the body of an individual from what is its place is the inside of the body. Because we know sweat and snot and things like this, they don't nullify wudu, nor are they in the circumstance or the same ruling as blood. But what they mean that whatever comes out of a person, like pus or things of this nature that might come out of a wound or come from a place that they don't belong, then this is from the things that nullify one's wudu. So this is the first view, that pus in all of its different types nullify one's wudu. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, وَقَالَ طَائِفَةٌ لَيْسَ فِي خُرُوجِ الْقَيْحِ وَالصَّدِيدِ وُضُوء. هذا قول الحسن البصري وقال عطاء في الماء الذي يخرج من القرح ليس فيه شيء. He says, and a different group or another group says there is no wudu necessary for the excretion of qayh or sadid. There's no wudu necessary for the excretion of pus. He says, and this is the statement of Al-Hasan al-Basri and Ata, and that same Ata we just mentioned, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, He says, and Ata, he said regarding the water that comes out of the wound. So Ata, he said about pus, that it necessitates a wudu. But as far as that clear liquid that is similar to water that comes out of a wound, then Ata, he said regarding the water that exits out of a wound, there's nothing necessary for that. And so it's as if he's making that which nullifies the wudu, that which exits the body from najasat. But as far as the water, then it's as if he doesn't see it to be najis. And Allah knows best. Now, Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, وَكَانَ أَبُو مِجْلَزْ لَا يَرَى فِي الْقَيْهِ شَيْئًا وقال إنما ذكر في كتابه عز وجل الدم المسفوح وكان الأوزاعي يقول في قرحة سال منها كغسالة اللحم ليس بدم ولا قيح ولا وضوء فيه. He says that Abu Mijlas, he said he used to not see pus as anything. He didn't consider there to be any rulings related to pus. And he said the only thing that Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in his book is spilled blood, ad-dam al-masfuh. And that spilled blood is that blood that gushes, that blood that shoots out with force from the body or from the veins. He says, Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, وَكَانَ الْأَوْزَاعِي. Awza'i used to say regarding a wound that has liquid seeping out of it, similar to the liquid that you see when you run water over a piece of meat. We talked about it before, ghasalat al-lahm, like when you buy a pack of steaks or a pack of meat and you see that clear reddish tinted water or liquid in the pack. That's what they call ghasalat al-lahm, right? So if an individual has a wound where this type of fluid is coming out of him, Al-Awza'i, he used to say regarding it, laysa bidam, it's not blood, wala qayh, and it's not pus, and so there's no wudu necessary for it. All right, so the statement of Al-Awza'i here is similar to the statement of Ata ibn Abi Rabah, that ma'ul qarh, there's no wudu for it. Now, Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, وقال أحمد بن حنبل في القيح والصديد هذا كله أيسر عندي من الدم وقال إسحاق كل ما سوى الدم لا يوجب وضوءا. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he said regarding pus, al-qayh was-sadid, pus in its different forms, Imam Ahmad said regarding it, all of that with me is something easier than blood. It's lighter, it's easier, it's simpler than blood. Meaning blood, Imam Ahmad, he used to see that it is najis and it nullifies the wudu. But here, the pus is something that was easier than that. It's not that serious. Ibn al-Mundhir, he said in Ishaq, yani Ishaq ibn Rahuya, he said, everything that is not blood, then it does not necessitate wudu. So his view is almost the complete opposite of that which was mentioned on Hamad and who else had it? Hamad and Al-Hakam, right? Al-Hakam and Hamad, they said that everything that comes out the body is similar to blood. Here is Ishaq ibn Rahuya. He's saying that everything besides blood, there is no wudu because of it. And so this is the second position. And you notice one thing that is missing for both sides. Neither one of the sides, according to Ibn al-Mundhir, he doesn't present any text to support either one of the opinions. He doesn't present a text to support the opinion of those who say that pus and the liquid that comes out of wounds nullifies one's wudu, nor does he present any evidence to support the opinion that the liquid that comes out of one's wound or pus doesn't nullify wudu. And this is the reason why scholars disagree about it, because there's no evidence for it. We mentioned the statement of Abi Mijlas that the only thing that Allah mentions in his book is الدم المسفوح. And so here, the only thing we can do to establish it is qiyas. And the only evidence we need to negate it is bara'at al-asliyah. And so we have these two principles that are conflicting with each other. Do we say that the foundation is that there's nothing for it because Allah didn't mention anything? Or do we compare it to blood? Abu Bakr ibn al-Mundhir, he says, ليس مع من أوجب في القيه والصديد وماء القرح الوضوء حجة. The people who make it wajib, the people who make wudu wajib for al-qayh and as-sadid and ma al-qarh, the people who make wudu wajib for pus and all of its forms and the liquid that comes out of a wound, they have no hujjah. There is no evidence with the people who make wudu wajib because of pus or the liquid that comes out of a wound. He says, وَقَدْ ذَكَرْنَا مَذْهَبَ مَالِكٍ وَأَهْلِ الْمَدِينَةِ وَقَدْ ذَكَرْنَا مَذْهَبَ مَالِكٍ وَأَهْلِ الْمَدِينَةِ وَالشَّافِعِي وَأَصْحَابِهِ فِي هَذَا الْبَابِ. And we've already mentioned the madhab of Malik and the people of Medina and Ash-Shafi'i and his companions regarding this topic. He says, وَقَالَ أَصْحَابُ الرَّأْيِ, and that would be in the conversation that dealt with ru'af, that dealt with the nosebleed, and Allah knows best. He says, وَقَالَ أَصْحَابُ الرَّأْيِ فِي النِّفْطَةِ مِنْهَا مَاء أو دم أو قيح أو صديد إن سال أن رأس الجرح نقض وضوء وإن لم يسيل لم ينقض. He says, as far as the people of Ar-Ra'i, i.e. the Ahnaf, then they say regarding a nifta, then this is a pimple. a nifta al-bathra. They're talking about a pimple or a wart or a boil. When they pop, he says that they might have blood in them or pus in them or sadid, the other type of pus. They say if the pimple, when it pops, if the liquid drips down from the wound, then this nullifies the wudu. But if the liquid does not drip, then it does not nullify the wudu. And so this is the opinion of the scholars regarding pus in all of its forms, as well as the water and the liquid that comes out of the wounds of a body part. Some of them say yes, some of them say no, but Ibn al-Mundhir, and Allah knows best, perhaps it's the stronger view. He supports the view that there is no obligation there upon the individual. And that's because there's no evidence for there being any wudu necessary for those events, for the excretion of pus in all of its forms or the liquid out of a wound. طيب, after finishing with blood and the things that are similar to blood, the author goes into another conversation. He says, ذِكْرُ الْوُضُوء مِنَ الْقَيْءِ, mentioning wudu because of vomit. And al-qay is when an individual has projectile vomit, the vomit that leaves one's mouth, right? Or that fills the mouth and exits. That is al-qay. So does vomiting nullify one's wudu? We know that some scholars say yes, some scholars say no, some scholars say if they do it on purpose. And they also talk about that regarding the fasting, if you throw up on purpose while fasting. So the point is what is the position of the people of knowledge regarding vomit? And as we said, you have to understand that the word al-qay is the vomit that leaves the throat and finds its way into the mouth or is projected, right? That projectile vomit. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, اختلف أهل العلم في الوضوء من القي فأوجبت طائفة منهم الوضوء فممن روينا عنه أنه رأى الوضوء علي بن أبي طالب وأبو هريرة وكان ابن عمر يأمر بالوضوء منه وروينا عن ابن عباس أنه قال الحدث حدثان حدث من فيك وحدث من أسفل منك وعن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال الإفطار مما دخل وليس مما خرج والوضوء مما خرج وليس مما دخل. He says the people of knowledge, they disagree regarding wudu because of vomit. So a group of them make it obligatory upon the person to perform wudu. And from those who we have transmitted that they hold the view that the individual must make wudu is Ali ibn Abi Talib, as well as Abu Hurairah and Ibn Umar. He used to command that a person make wudu because of vomit. He says, and we've also reported on Ibn Abbas that he said there are two things that nullify wudu. There are two hadath. Al-hadath, hadathan. There are two things that nullify wudu. A hadath that comes from your mouth and a hadath that comes from your lower portion. And also on the authority of Ibn Abbas, he said, breaking the fast is because of what comes in, not because of what comes out. And wudu is because of what comes out, not because of what goes in. And so this is a principle by Ibn Abbas that breaking the fast is because of what you consume, and it has nothing to do with what comes out of your body. So vomit doesn't break your fast. Whereas wudu is because of what comes out, not because of what goes in. So for example, eating camel meat wouldn't break your fast according to this principle of Ibn Abbas. So these are the people that he mentioned have this view: Ali and Abu Hurairah and Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas. As he does, he now mentions the narrations that support what he has attributed to these individuals from the Sahaba. And so he says, حدثنا علي بن الحسن قال حدثنا عبد الله عن سفيان عن أبي إسحاق عن الحارث عن علي رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال من وجد رزا في بطنه أو رعافا أو قيئا فلينصرف وليتوضأ فإن تكلم استقبل وإن لم يتكلم بنى على ما مضى من صلاتي. This narration has proceeded with us in a different chapter. Abu Bakr, he says that Ali ibn al-Hasan narrated to us. He said that Abdullah narrated to us on the authority of Sufyan, on the authority of Abi Ishaq, on the authority of Al-Harith, on the authority of Ali, yani Ibn Abi Talib, who said that whoever finds a rumbling in his stomach or a nose or has a nosebleed or vomits, then he should leave, i.e. he should leave the salat and he should make wudu. He must leave the salat and he must make wudu. They often translate it he should, right? This word, this lam here is a lam of amr. فَلْيَنْصَرِفْ. Then he must leave the salat and he must make wudu. And if he talks, he must start over. But if he doesn't speak, then he can start from what he left or what was passed from his salat. If he talks while going to make wudu, then he has to start the salat from the beginning. But if he doesn't talk when going to make wudu, then he can pick up where he left off in his salat. He can build on top of whatever he had already done from his salat. So this is the statement of Ali showing that he held the view that vomit necessitated you leaving the salat and making wudu. Abu Bakr, he says, حدثنا إسحاق and Abdul Razzaq and Ma'mar and الزهري and Salim and Ibn Umar رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال إذا رأوا في الرجل أو ذرعه القيء أو وجد مذيا فإنه ينصرف فيتوضأ ثم يرجع فيبني ما بقي على ما مضى إن لم يتكلم. He says that Ishaq narrated to us on Abdul Razzaq, on the authority of Ma'mar, on the authority of Az-Zuhri, on the authority of Salim, on the authority of Ibn Umar, on the authority of Ibn Umar, who said if an individual has a nosebleed or if he projects vomit, either ضرعه القي, if vomit overtakes him and he spits out vomit, or he finds some pre-seminal fluid, midhian, yani midhi, he finds some pre-cum i.e. on his private part, then this individual should leave, i.e. should leave the salat and go make wudu. Then when he returns, he can build up what's left on top of what has passed, as long as he doesn't speak. When he returns to the salat, he can pick up where he left off, as long as he doesn't talk in the interim. نعم, he says, حدثنا محمد بن نصر قال حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا مسلم بن إبراهيم قال حدثنا حمام قال حدثنا عسل بن سفيان عن عطاء عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال يعاد الوضوء من القيء والرعاف. He says that Muhammad ibn Nasr narrated to us. He said that Muhammad ibn Yahya narrated to us. He said that Muslim ibn Ibrahim narrated to us, who said that Hammam narrated to us, who said that Isl ibn Sufyan narrated to us, on the authority of Ata, on the authority of Abi Hurairah, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who said, wudu needs to be repeated because of vomit and because of a nosebleed. نعم. He says, حدثنا محمد قال حدثنا إسحاق قال أخبرنا علي الرازي عن عبد الكريم عن مجاهد عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أنه قال الحدث حدثان حدث من فيك وحدث من أسفل منك. He says that Muhammad narrated to us. He said that Ishaq narrated to us, who said that Ali al-Razi informed us, who said that Abdul Karim, who said on the authority of Abdul Karim, on the authority of Mujahid, on the authority of Ibn Abbas, who said that there are two types of hadith. A hadith that comes from your mouth and a hadith that comes from below you. There are two types of things that nullify your wudu. One that comes from your mouth and one that comes from below you. And the point of reference is that vomit is the one that comes from your mouth. Abu Bakr, he says, حدثنا يحيى بن يحيى قال حدثنا يزيد بن الزريع عن إكرمة عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أنه قال الإفطار مما دخل وليس مما خرج والوضوء مما خرج وليس مما دخل. And so these are the chains and the narrations that support what he mentioned from the view of the Sahaba, who held the view that vomit nullifies one's wudu. Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abu Hurairah, Ibn Umar, and Ibn Abbas. That is who held that position from the Sahaba. Abu Bakr, he says, وَمِمَّنْ رَأَى مِنْهُ الْوُضُوء عَطَاء بْنُ أَبِي رَبَاحٍ وَالزُّهْرِي وَبِهِ قَالَ الْأَوْزَاعِي وَأَحْمَدُ بْنُ حَنْبَلٍ. He says, and from those who adopted this view that wudu is necessary because of this, because of vomit, are Ata ibn Abi Rabah, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, the Imam of Mecca, as well as Az-Zuhri, i.e. one of the Imams of Medina. And it was the position adopted by Al-Awza'i. Al-Awza'i was a Sahib madhab. He had a madhab from the people of Ash-Sham, as well as Ahmed ibn Hanbal. Of those madhahib that are still in existence today, the Hanbali madhab adopts this view. He says, وَقَالَ أَصْحَابُ الرَّأْيِ إِن تَقَيَّأَ مُتَعَمِّدًا أَوْ غَيْرَ مُتَعَمِّدٍ أَوْ قَلَسَ مَلْأَ فِيهِ أَعَادَ الْوُضُوء وَإِنْ كَانَ الْقَلَسْ أَقَلَّ مِنْ مَلْءِ فِيهِ لَمْ يَعِدْ الْوُضُوء. The people of Ar-Ra'i, i.e. the Ahnaf, they have a little bit more detail in their view, as is usually the case. He says, Ibn al-Mundhir says that the people of Ar-Ra'i, they say if the individual vomits on purpose, they stick their finger, or they eat something, or they smell something, or they look at something that they know will cause them to vomit, or if they vomit not on purpose, or if they have al-qalas, and al-qalas is the vomit that doesn't project, the vomit that comes into the throat and then goes back down, like you might have an indigestion or a burp, and the vomit comes into the throat and maybe gets into the mouth, but then it goes back down automatically. It's not even something that you necessarily control. He says if a person has khalas that fills their mouth, then this individual needs to repeat the wudu. But if the khalas, i.e. the vomit that comes into the throat, doesn't fill their mouth, then that individual does not need to remake the wudu. That is the view of the people of Ar-Ra'i. Abu Bakr, he says, وَاخْتَلَفَ أَصْحَابُ الرَّأْيِ إِذَا تَقَيَّأَ مِلْءَ فِيهِ بُلْغَمًا فقال النعمان ومحمد لا يعيد الوضوء وقال يعقوب البلغم كغيره من الطعام والشراب إذا كان ملء فيه أعاد الوضوء. He says the people of Ar-Ra'i, yani the Ahnaf, they also have a different distinction as well. So they disagree regarding if the individual vomits a mouthful of spit, right? Of spit. And like sometimes, especially nowadays after Corona, I find like sometimes if I drink cold water and I have an itch in my throat, and then you might cough and you have a bunch of spit come up. It's not food, it's not vomit. It's not something that was actually in your stomach. It's just the spit and bulagam, the snot, the mucus, right? All of that congestion. The Ahnaf, they disagree, or Ashab al-Ra'i, they disagree if an individual vomits a mouthful of, snot and mucus and things like that. And so Nu'man and Muhammad, Nu'man Abu Hanifa, and Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. Nu'man and Muhammad, they say if it was just mucus and snot, then the individual doesn't need to remake wudu, even if it was a mouthful. As while Yaqub, Yaqub Abu Yusuf, he says that snot or mucus is just like other than it from food and drink. If it fills the mouth, then the individual needs to make wudu again. And so this is the view of the Ahnaf. Right. We notice, so we mentioned yes in all circumstances. And then we mentioned yes in some circumstances. And then what we notice for the yeses, once again, and this is why the author put it in what the scholars disagree about. And we said our general principle is whatever he puts in this section what the scholars disagree about, then he is defaulting to that. There is no proof for it. And so therefore it is not necessary. And this is why we see him talking about this topic and not mentioning any evidence for the ones who say that it is necessary to make wudu if you vomit. The burden of proof is upon the one who establishes. And for that reason, he says, وَكَانَ مَالِكْ وَأَصْحَابُهُ لا يرون في القيء وضوءا وكذلك قال الشافعي وأبو ثور وقال مالك رأيت ربيعة يقلس ثم لا ينصرف حتى يصلي. He says in Malik, and this is the second opinion, he says in Malik, as well as his companions, they used to not see there being any need for wudu for vomit. And likewise a Shafi'i, as well as Abu Thawr. And Malik said, I saw Rabi'ah, yani Rabi'atul Ra'i, vomit in his throat, al-qalas, right? That throat, that vomit that doesn't leave one's mouth or throat. I saw Rabi'ah having qalas, and then he didn't leave until he was finished praying. He continued to pray, or he didn't go and remake wudu before praying. And so this is the second view, and it's as if this is the view that Ibn al-Mundhir is adopting. But we have an issue. We see that there were statements of the Sahaba supporting making wudu because of this. And in those who disagreed with the Sahaba, he doesn't mention anybody from the Sahaba who had the other view. And so that leads to concern. You would say, well, maybe I want to stick with the Sahaba, even if I don't have a text to rely on in this issue. If there's nothing except the Sahaba and the statements of other than the Sahaba, then I would prefer the statements of the Sahaba. And there are four Sahabi: Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Abu Hurairah, and Ali. And these are four of the best Sahaba, especially in narration and fatwa. But an individual might argue on the opposite side. The view of Imam Malik is a narrating of the view of the people of Medina. And so for that reason, you would say that Imam Malik's view would be on other Sahaba that aren't named, because he's attributing it to the people of Medina. Whatever the case may be, right? We see there's no evidence in it. So here, do you go with al-bara'at al-asliyah? Do you go with the fundamental freedom of obligation and say that there's no wudu necessary? Or do you say, well, you know what Sahaba said to make wudu from this, and I don't have anything to go against the Sahaba, and so I'll do what the Sahaba said? And for this reason, you see that this was the view adopted by Imam Ahmed. And I often mention, like, the madhab of Imam Ahmed is like the flip side of the coin of the madhab of the Zahiriyah. The Zahiriyah, they often dominate the view that there's no obligation until there's a proof. While Imam Ahmed, while similar to that in his adherence to the book and the Sunnah, he dominates the view upon you is the Salaf, and better safe than sorry. And so for that reason, you find Imam Ahmed adopting the view that I'd rather make wudu from vomit than not. One possible response to those who say that you have to make wudu from vomit, and they use the statements of Ali and Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas and Abu Hurairah, even though this response is weak. And the reason it's weak is because their statements are pretty clear. But one response that somebody could make is that their command to make wudu was a suggestion, and it was a suggestion based on the fact that you're going to wash your mouth out anyway. When you vomit, you're going to clean yourself. And since you're going to clean yourself, why not make a wudu? Why not make wudu as the action that you use to clean yourself? Because there's no better way to clean yourself than wudu. And so if you're going to have to clean your mouth out when you vomit, everybody will say, if you throw up, if you touch your underarms, if you touch your feet, if you touch your private parts, if you pick your nose, everybody's going to say to you, wash. And so since everybody's going to say to you, wash and clean yourself from that action, what's the best way you know how to clean yourself? The best way I know how to clean myself is the cleaning that I have to do to pray for Allah. And so since I'm going to be washing anyway, I might as well make a wudu. And this is what some of them mention regarding why you see those who have opinions about making wudu for things that there's no evidence about. I.e., maybe the wudu is a strong suggestion because you're going to be washing anyway. When you vomit, you're going to wash your mouth out. So since you're already washing your mouth out, wash your face, wash your arms, wipe your head, wash your feet, make a wudu, get the ajr, especially if we talk about making wudu is an act of worship that you can do multiple times. And so renewing your wudu is an act of worship. And you're already halfway there. You might as well just do it all. And so that's what some of them mention regarding why these individuals sometimes say that there is a wudu in a situation where there's no wudu necessary for it based on the Quran and the Sunnah. And Allah knows best. But those are the two opinions about making wudu from al-qay, which is projectile vomit. Next time, the author will talk about making wudu from al-qalas, which is that vomit that doesn't exit the throat, or it might exit the throat into the mouth but doesn't project. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Why does a person need to make wudu when vomiting? That's the question. And so the question is, so why does a person need to make wudu when they use the toilet? Right? Why does a person need to make wudu when they touch a woman? Why does the person need to make wudu when they touch their private part? The simple answer is that this is the Sharia. This is what we've been commanded with. But the question is wudu similar to sleep? Is wudu similar to passing gas? There's no clear-cut text to support such an opinion. But there are Sahaba who said, yes, wudu is necessary for those things. And so now you have the question of, is this statement of the Sahabi something that there's no room for opinion in, and therefore it must be a text? Or is this statement of the Sahabi his ijtihad in the issue, comparing it to other things that are nasty that come out of the body, like urine and poo? So, for example, defecation is nothing more than throw up coming out of the other direction. And so if you throw up out of your mouth, it's similar to defecating. Food has entered the stomach, begun to get break down, mixed, and is now najis. And so if you vomit, right, is it najis or is it, and things like this. This is why they disagree. And so you have some of the Sahaba who say yes, that wudu is necessary, while you have other scholars who say no, that wudu isn't necessary for wudu. And so if you hold the view that the statement of a Sahabi is an evidence, or that this is an opinion, or that this is a statement where there's no room for opinion, or that better safe than sorry, then you adopt the position of the Sahaba that have been mentioned, and you say you got to make wudu if you vomit. Whereas if you adopt the madhab of Imam Malik or the madhab of Imam Shafi'i or Abi Thawr, you say, you know what? No, you don't need to, because there's no proof. And the foundation is proof. So why does a person need to make wudu when vomiting? Based on what they understand the Sharia to be. And the answer is the same as it relates to why do we make wudu for anything? Because Allah and His Messenger commanded us to do so. Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah. Wa iyyak. Ahsanallah alayk. Hayakum Allah. Does picking up and using a tissue to wipe tears and nasal discharge caused by crying during salat invalidate the prayer? That is a different issue regarding al-harakat fi salat, actions during salat. And the scholars have different views regarding actions during salat and the small amount of actions versus the large amount of actions, and what is the criteria. And so that which I adopt, and I hope, right, that there's no harm in picking up a tissue and wiping the wiping the tears that one might have during salat. That which I hope is that it doesn't invalidate the salat, as long as the individual doesn't have to go far for the tissue, to where we can see that the individual is still in salat, right? If I saw that person, for example, I would say, why is that person grabbing tissue while praying? And so my default thought is that that person is still praying. And so therefore, I would hope that it doesn't invalidate the salat. But if the person does something to where it doesn't seem that they're praying anymore, where I would say, why did that person stop praying to go get tissue? Then I would say that that invalidates the salat. But as we said, the scholars disagree. And at the end of the day, there's no need to get the tissue. Khalik, mashallah. If Allah blessed you to have a soft heart, to cry out of fear of Him and out of love for Him and out of hope with what is with Him during the salat, then you don't need to get tissue to wipe your tears. And Allah knows best. Those are the kibar of the Sahaba. Yeah, those four: Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Ali, and Abu Hurairah. In reality, Ali is from the kibar of the Sahaba, but all four of them are from those who were known for fatwa. And even though all four of them weren't abundant in hadith, because Imam Ali radiallahu ta'ala, he wasn't abundant in narrating hadith, he was an imam from the imams of the Muslim, and the fourth Khalifa, and the Khalifa of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so when you put those four together, it gives us some strength. It makes you kind of cautious to say, well, I'm going to do what Malik said or what Shafi'i said until I find some other Sahaba who might have adopted a different opinion. I mean, yes, of course, the scholars are very wise men when making rulings. Wa iyyakum. Wa subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.